Hey everybody, it's Bill Ryan from Ryan Enterprise in Ryanville here in Denver, North Carolina, and we are here with a really special guest and a really great friend, Cliff Champion. If you're not familiar with Cliff Champion, he has worked for everybody from Richard Childress to Hilton to Benny Parsons to, Ricky Rudd. I mean, there's a big list.
Somebody asked my wife yesterday, one of the girls, she saw where we had been to Mount Airy up there, and she said, I didn't know he was in racing. Who did he work for? Who was he crew chief for? And she asked me, I said, well, Ricky Rudd, Dale Jarrett, Cale Yarborough, Benny Parsons, Phil Parsons, Alan Kowicki, Richard Childress. You know, I started, she told her 2 or 3, and then she said, and many more. That was close enough.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, and so we're going to go back to the beginning because I want to get as much of the story as I can. In the beginning, you weren't like when I grew up, I wanted to be a NASCAR guy. I wanted to be a crew member, wanted to be a driver. Yours wasn't quite like that. You were a hot rod and a car guy, but then you just kind of, through circumstances and friends and family, you got put into this and you were just really good at it, I think.
Well, I don't know if I was good at it as much as determined. You know, that's the thing, you know, I was like most racers, we're just used to doing whatever it takes to get the job done.
Right.
You know, and if you got to work till 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, or work all night long. You know, every racer I know can tell you the story where, we worked around the clock for 3 days. You know, and it was funny, you'd get to the racetrack sometimes, and maybe somebody crashed a car the week before, and they show up at the racetrack, and, you know, you're thinking, man, we just worked all night long last night to get here. And then they get there and go, oh yeah, we worked 3 days straight. So you're like, my story don't mean nothing. You know?
That's right.
There's somebody always had it worse than you, so whatever it was.
That's true. I tell you what, that was one thing I learned, and I'm glad I came along when I did, because I was still at the tail end of that. You know, with Ricky Craven and Adam Petty and the smaller teams, not as many people. There were some, 3 days in a row, and you loved being at the racetrack because if you didn't wreck, they threw you out at 5 o'clock.
Exactly.
You had to go back to the hotel.
Love that.
Yep. That's right. That's right. So you can tell those guys that were from that era because it's like, oh, racetrack. That's good. We're going to get out of here before midnight. You know. So let's get into how you got started. We touched on a little bit off camera, but I want you to tell them kind of how that started and the drag racing and your friends, and then kind of rolling into the NASCAR world.
Okay. Well, when I was a young teenager, 15, 16 years old, I just had some friends that drag race local and I got introduced to a guy that had a injected funny car, and I helped him for a while, traveled on the road with him. And then I got to hanging around with Ricky Rudd's brother, Al Rudd Jr.
Okay.
He had a dune buggy, and my dad took me by there, and my dad knew his dad. He took me by there, showed me his dune buggy, and went and bought me a body, and Al built me a dune buggy. And from that time on, Al Jr. and I were pretty much inseparable. Cool. And we rebuilt totals together. His dad had the junkyard. We rebuilt totals together and did all kinds of things. And he came to me one day and said, hey, I want to go to Daytona. And I'm like, man, I said, I don't really care to go to Daytona. He said, oh, come on, I want to go down there. This is like in July.
Yeah.
I said, man, that's like watching paint dry. I said, I ain't going down there sit in the stands for 4 hours. I said, he said, I really want to go. I said, well, I'll go if we can get in the garage or something, but I ain't going to go sit in the stands.
Yeah, there you go.
And he said, well, call your cousin Bill, which is Bill Champion. And so I called Bill, and Bill's like, yeah, I'll get you in. So we got down there, and we're just kind of standing around in the garage area, and a guy he had, it was a lot of pickup help in. He had a guy working the gas station helping him with the car, and he was there adjusting valves, and I noticed that he didn't really know what he was doing. He had, how you'd bump where, the valves would be closed and you adjust the other one and stuff like that. Well, he was doing it wrong, and I'd noticed he'd turn the motor over and the rocker arm would drop about 1/4 inch. He was adjusting them right at the right time. Yeah. Right there. So I was like, Bill, I said, I ain't trying to be a smart ass or nothing. I said, but that guy adjusting valves don't know what he's doing. He said, well, you know how to do it? I said, yeah. So he said, Smitty, get out of the way. So I was in there adjusting valves. And then something broke on the car, and we had Jim Hurtubise was going to qualify the car for him.
Yeah.
And something broke in the steering, and AJ and I asked him real quick, you got a spare one? Yeah, because they were just standing there looking at it. So we threw that on there, and he went out and practiced. So we got back to the motel that night, and he offered me a job.
Wow.
And I was down there. It was like my 21st birthday, and you know, it's like join the Navy and see the world.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
So
yeah.
I think he offered me like 10% of what the car took in, and we at Daytona, you know, for last place, we busted a cylinder wall in the race. I think I took home I got like $600 and some. Well, I was used to making $100, $125 a week, so I was on. Well, then my rude awakening was the next race we went to was Richmond.
Yeah. So you might not have made that deal if Richmond was the first race.
I think it paid about $600 for the whole car, so I made like $60 on that week. But you know, it was kind of lured me in on that one.
Yep. Oh wow.
But I worked for Bill. The first time I'd ever really worked on a circle track car. We never did short track racing. I never did any of that. I just went from drag racing right into
NASCAR.
To NASCAR, and we busted a cylinder wall, and we got home, and Bill goes, well, I ordered a new block to be here in 2 days, and the motor room's back there. So I was crew chief, motor builder, we're at bearing packer. I mean, it was just me and him. So, I mean, I had built a couple of motors, street motors, and, you know, some stuff like that, but I had never, you know, assembled some drag motors, but nothing like that. Didn't know the first thing about a circle track motor.
I tell you what, our kids nowadays miss that. You know, you were 21 years old, you had built motors, built your dune buggy, had a great basic knowledge of, you know, mechanics and what I call backyard engineering.
Yeah.
Didn't go to school for it, but you figured it out to build it. And, you know, these kids nowadays spend so much time on that phone. They don't, I'm sad for them in a way because they're missing. That's how I was, you know, rebuild the lawnmower, fix this, fix that, you know, and half the time when you started, you were sure hoping you could get it back together when you were done. Because you hadn't pulled this apart before and you didn't really know all the ins and outs and whatnot. And there was something really cool about that these kids nowadays won't experience.
I thought about that just recently. I went over to Raleigh to help a friend fix his four-wheeler for his son. His son had broke his four-wheeler. He had tore the axle up and the hub, and I had to take the CV joint apart and put it all back together, switch them from part to part to get it to work. And his son just walked around, you know, went off playing and stuff. It didn't help at all, did nothing. And which I don't mind. I didn't mind doing. I mean, I was glad I could help him out. Right. But at the same time, I think his son was missing out on a good opportunity. Yes. To if it breaks, you're not driving it unless you fix it. Right. You know, you know, that's how we learned. That's how I learned.
Well, in some of those racing days, if it broke, you had to fix it before you got home.
That's true.
You know, Henley Gray told me a funny story about burning a piston in the race car, pulling one out of the tow rig, whatever their truck was, their Ford truck, getting the piston in the race car, finishing the race. They had to start the race to get paid. Yeah, so starting the race, running the race and stopping, then having to take the piston back out and get it back in the tow rig, put the motor back together so we could drive back to go home to Georgia. Sure. And it's like, that's crazy and awesome all at the same time. Yeah.
There was a lot of that kind of stuff back then.
So James Hilton, how long were you with James Hilton?
I was there for a year with him.
And that was after helping Bill?
That was after helping Bill. Then we had dropped a valve at Atlanta when Ricky was driving the car. He was he had just started. What we did was after working with Bill, we talked him into letting Ricky drive the car the next year. Okay. The second year there. And of course, Ricky's dad, I think, bought a set of tires for him, whatever, you know, to get Ricky in the car. Yeah. And Ricky actually did pretty good in the car. I can't remember, I think the first race was Rockingham, and we finished either 10th or 11th. First time he drove a stock car or anything, you know.
Yeah, and Rockingham's not easy.
Of course, back then, it's a little different. I mean, people don't realize that there was only 1 or 2 cars in the lead lap. Maybe 3 cars in the lead lap back then. True. We finished, it was either 10th or 11th, 23 laps down.
You're kidding. Oh my God!
I mean, but that's the way it was back then.
A lot of attrition, yeah.
You know, yeah, attrition. If you could just finish races, then you did good. And his other race, he finished 11th at the next race. So he was doing pretty good. But we went to Atlanta, and the leaders were coming around up behind him, and he pulled down and spun. You know, trying to stay out of their way because you know, being a young kid. I mean, he was barely. Well, let's see. If I was 21, Ricky's 3 years younger than me and his brother, right there.
Oh, wow.
So he wasn't very old at all. I mean, he's probably 19 years old.
Wow.
Something like that. And 19, 20, 20, yeah, he was about 18, 19 years old. Man. But when he spun, he backed up and it backed the motor up, and it dropped. You know, after that, it dropped a valve.
Right.
You know, which you do a lot of times.
Yeah.
You'll do something like that after you spin one.
Turn the cam backwards.
Turn the motor backwards, and it'll do that. So anyway, we fixed that, and Bill didn't have the money for, you know, the high dollar valves, and he couldn't find one, so he went to the dealership and bought a valve and put it in there, and Ricky's dad told him not to. Well, he put it in there, and we went to the racetrack, dropped the valve, and tore the motor all up and everything, and they got into a big argument and everything. So then that was the end of Ricky driving the car. So
wow.
I went to work for James Hilton then, and Ricky and them ended up buying their own car after that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, was Will Cronkite involved in that?
No,
or
not
he came
at that
along
time.
a little later?
They ran some, and then I went to work for Childress. I'd gone to work for Childress, and they were running for Rookie of the Year in '77.
Okay. So for all you younger folks, this is Richard Childress as a race car driver, not Richard Childress as a car owner.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We had CRC and Kansas Jack.
Yep.
Was our sponsorship back then, but Richard was driving the car, and which that was an experience working for Richard Childress too. You know, Richard and James Hilton were two characters, right in their own right, right there. But about halfway through the season, we had a guy come over there that I didn't really get along with that good, and Ricky and them were having a tough time running for Rookie of the Year. You know, just trying to get by. So I quit and came home, and we worked at a Will Cronkite shop.
Okay.
Down in was it Rock Hill or Fort Mill? I can't never remember which one down there.
They're the same town unless you live there.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
But we did that for a while, and then I don't know, there was a falling out somewhere, and Will left, and I kind of took over doing stuff. But it was funny when we first started racing that. I'd been with Bill, so I knew the race cars and built motors and everything. And Ricky's brother had built like a boat motor or something like that, you know, dune buggy motors and stuff like that. But and they did go-kart racing, but he never built a race motor like I did, the same thing. And we came back, and Ray Fox Jr. was building the motors for their car, for Ricky's dad for the car there. And I had come down to Charlotte. He was over in Harrisburg. He had a shop, and they did put one together and went and dynoed it, and I wasn't real happy. They dynoed it, and all they did was kind of fire it up, and the smoke ran out, and they leaned it down a little bit and everything and made a run, and that was it. You know, it didn't really do much. Yeah. You know, so anyway, I was talking to Ricky's dad about it, and he loaded up my Vega station wagon. I drove back down to Charlotte and loaded all the motor parts up in there, and then I got back to the shop, and I told Ricky's brother come walking out the door, and I said, look, I can't take care of the car and build the motors too. I wrote down on a piece of paper, give me like, you know, 3.5 to 4 thousandths clearance on the mains right there, you know, and give me this much on the rods, and give me about 12 to 18 thousandths end gap on the rings. I handed him a piece of paper. I said, here, you build the motors. I said, I'll take care of the car.
See, that's so cool though. That's cool, so cool for that time of racing that you could do that.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't have 12 engineers now in a, you know, $6 million facility, you don't even. It's not even a thought. And back
I really
then,
liked it better myself.
I
just
agree.
because it was what you could figure out.
Yeah.
It wasn't who had the best engineers and who had the most money and stuff like that. It's like whatever you could figure out. I mean, when we started at Ricky's, we would go out there, and we were lucky. We had one of those a Cougar Eliminator.
Yeah.
that had the 4-speed top loader in it. So we got us a transmission. I mean, of course, his dad had the junkyard.
Right,
and then we'd have a pickup truck that come in, had a 370 gear. We'd get us a 370 gear and put in there. We needed some springs. We'd go out there and get the rear springs out of a station wagon or something, and cut them down and make the rear springs.
Yep. Wow.
And the first time we wrecked the car, he bought a car from Robert G. And then one that they had built for Charlie Glotzback to drive and stuff. But we didn't know about making fenders and stuff. We're used to stock fenders, and we needed a panel. And so I went out in the junkyard back there, and we just looked around and found the car that had the biggest piece of flat metal, a roof or a hood or something like that, and cut it out, ground the paint off, and made us a fender.
That's awesome. See, that's
we
awesome.
We didn't know you could buy sheet metal.
Yeah. Oh my gosh! Wow. Now was that the black 22 car, or was that later?
That was the first car that they bought was. Let's see, when I came back, they had a red and white car.
Okay.
That they got Thunderbird to build them one.
Okay.
And the cars changed colors over the years, so it was a lot of the same car.
Okay.
And stuff. But they bought the white car from Robert G. After he'd run a little while, they bought that. They had, I guess, Robert G. knew Ricky's dad.
Okay.
They did body work together at one time. Robert G. lived up in Norfolk, and the story I hear is that the judge told Robert G. to leave town and don't come back.
So he ended up in Charlotte.
So he ended up in Charlotte. That was a story I was told about that. But anyway, Ricky's dad called him and bought that car from him. And it was a number 3 at the time with the black gold, I think, on the hood. It had a lot to do with, I believe the car actually belonged to Kenneth Trout.
Okay.
He was one of them that built it. It had a plaque on the dash when we got it, and it had the, you used to have to cover up the door handles.
Yeah.
They didn't let you fill them in. You just had to cover up the slot with a piece of aluminum.
Yep.
And they had a piece of aluminum on there that had Isaacs. Bobby Isaacs driven the car.
Yeah.
And they had Isaacs on the door handle.
Oh, cool.
Right there. And I'd like to have had those, but I don't know who ended up with them.
Oh man.
But,
yeah, that would be a neat piece to still have it. Yeah.
Yeah. But I told Kenneth Trout at the meet the other day that we ran that car 1 year, and then the next year they were checking the door bars and stuff. They'd got people putting light bars, especially on the right side right here. They put 60 thou bars instead of the 90.
Yep.
So we found out they were going to check those, and we checked ours, and we didn't know.
Yeah.
We just bought the car. So I ended up torching the bars out. And I just torched them out around the openings right there, and bought some new tubing, from Hutch. He had sent us a set of bars bent up and everything, and had to notch them out and put new bars in that side. Well, we didn't have no wire welder or nothing back then. We were lucky to have anything, and the guys had a body shop next door, and they had one of these little buzz boxes about that big, and it looked like some of them aluminum battery cables that you would use. And a matter of fact, it was a stick welder. Is all it was. It was a stick welder, and it had a piece of tubing with plastic on it for the handle, and the end was flattened, and it had a set screw going through it with a hole in it. And that's all it did. It would tighten down and tighten up on your rod.
Right. Yep. Oh my gosh.
And we didn't have much electricity in the shop, so I was trying to weld them door bars in with that buzz box. It would go, and it tripped the breaker, and somebody standing,
click it,
and I welded all the door bars in that car.
A half inch at a time.
For Daytona, I welded them a quarter inch at a time. I welded them in there, and we got done. I told Ricky, I said, if you hit the wall on the right side, duck. I don't know where these things are going to go, but it was funny because Ricky's best friend was a guy named Joey Stewart that was just like I was with Ricky's brother, just best buddies in school, and they raced motorcycles together and all that. But evidently he saved all that stuff from the junkyard back then, and when I went home about a year ago, he's still got those door bars.
Really?
They're still painted red. They're fine, just like they came out, just torched off right there.
Oh my gosh.
And he said, here, you might want these, and give them to me. So
that's cool.
I got them in my garage at the house.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Wow. So how long were you with Ricky? So he won Rookie of the Year in '77, correct?
One Rookie of the Year, and I think, that was in '77, and we ran '78, and then in '79, at the end of '78, typical brothers, Ricky and his brother AJ, that was building the motors, got into it. Ricky would always, the motor ain't got enough power. And well, you can't drive, and it back and forth. They fought and everything.
Well, you don't have to be brothers in NASCAR to argue about that.
No, that's true. That's true. But brothers are worse, I think. And anyway, they ended up kind of breaking up, and Ricky went and got a ride with Don Levy.
Okay. Yep.
And of course, it was all family money anyway, so money was probably tight too. Because I think AJ told him he was quitting; he wasn't going to build any no more motors, and everything kind of fell apart right there. So